Welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, why the US military is denying Bradley Manning the right to wear clothes. Election contracts, are they ever a good idea for politicians? And is it the right time to get rid of the first home owners grant? Our panel tonight, Annabel Crabb from ABC Online, New South Wales Green MP Cate Faehrmann, and former federal Liberal MP Ross Cameron. First to the nuclear crisis in Japan, and white smoke has been flowing from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. It's thought the containment vessel around Reactor 3 could be broken and releasing steam.
At Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, number 3 reactor has been seeing white smoke coming out. Currently, we are looking for the cause, and we are currently studying whether it is directly related to this white smoke or not. But near the front gate, the radiation reading is fluctuating hour by hour. But on the whole, it imposes no health hazard.
Search and rescue teams
Earlier, the remaining workers at the facility were told to evacuate after a rise in radiation levels. They've since returned.
Search and rescue
Back
teams.
home, the Prime Minister held a briefing on the situation in Japan. There are still fears for 94 Australians who haven't contacted family or embassy officials. And Julia Gillard has revealed a helicopter carrying 4 Australian search and rescue workers had been forced to land about 40 kilometres from the Fukushima plant. On returning to their base, 2 were tested for exposure to radiation.
Search and rescue teams train for dealing with contamination incidents, and consequently, in accordance with their training, the 2 members of the team went through decontamination procedures. The clear advice to me is that these 2 personnel are safe and well, and that the degree of contamination was low level and it was on their boots.
Joining us now from Tokyo is Eric Campbell from the ABC's Foreign Correspondent program. Eric, what's the latest news you're hearing from Fukushima?
Well, there was just a report then that more white smoke was coming out of the plant. Still not confirmed. It was an NHK cameraman in their helicopter some many kilometres away who reported that. But it does appear that problem is happening again, which suggests there may well be more radiation leaking from reactor number 3.
And Eric, the workers have been evacuated from Fukushima, which means I guess they can't work away at trying to solve the problems that are emanating from those reactors.
Well, we've heard that they have started going back in again. There is only a minimal skeleton staff of some 50 people there, but they do have to keep working because they have this constant battle to stop the reactors from overheating and stop the fuel rods from melting. And if they don't keep up with that, if they don't keep getting coolant into the reactors, then they are looking at quite a major disaster.
Eric, there seems to be a real issue too with the trust that the people have for those running the nuclear reactors in Japan, and it's something you've been looking at, is the lack of scrutiny of the companies who run these nuclear reactors in Japan. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there is a lot of mistrust at the moment, I think partly because there's very contradictory information coming out. Every few hours we hear different figures about radiation levels, about what's happening with various reactors, what the causes might be. There's no single co-ordered message coming out, and there also is a certain distrust of TEPCO, the company that owns the reactor, because it has been caught out before concealing safety breaches. Now, these are very powerful companies in Japan, the electricity companies. They're very close to the government, and there is a feeling now that perhaps the regulatory regime hasn't been strict enough, and perhaps not enough money has been put into strengthening the plants and their design to withstand the kind of disasters that can strike, the natural disasters that can strike in Japan.
Eric, there have been more aftershocks today. How are the locals dealing with those aftershocks?
Well, they're pretty sanguine. There was a very strong one today, about 2 o'clock, that went on for a couple of minutes. There was one last night that I wouldn't call it an aftershock, I'd call it an earthquake. I mean, for 3 minutes I was up in my hotel room on the 16th floor, and the room was just shaking and the coat hangers going back and forth. I mean, it felt more like an earthquake than an aftershock. But when you look down the streets, people are still walking around in restaurants and offices. They sort of take it in their stride. Japanese people are very used to this sort of thing, and the buildings here are very well built, so it's more foreigners and expats who get nervous rather than the Japanese.
Eric, thanks a lot for talking to us tonight.
Thank you.
Eric Campbell there from the ABC's Foreign Correspondent program. Well, Annabel, we talked a bit about the workers that had been evacuated and now are back in there. I mean, those 50 workers, the pressure that is on them to try and do something and the pressure that's on them to go into that environment and work with all that radiation around is extraordinary.
It's they're starting to be called the Fukushima 50. You know, this completely faceless group of individuals who remain behind. I mean, initially there was something like 800 workers. Now there's this skeleton staff of 50 to 70 that have drawn the short straw to remain behind. And one of the most amazing things in the last couple of days is that the Japanese health minister has actually re-proclaimed the amount of radiation that nuclear workers are can remain in the plant and sustain. From it was 100 millisieverts and it's gone up to 250. They've proclaimed that so that these workers can stay in that plant and try and save it, you know.
Yeah. So they've changed the rules. Cate, how do you feel about that? I mean, it's one of those situations, isn't it, where their lives are at risk, but if they're not there working, well, who knows how many more lives could be at risk?
Well, absolutely, but they almost are sacrificial lambs in this instance. I think they're they're rushed out when apparently radiation is released, and then someone declares that it's okay to go back. Meanwhile, of course, we know that within 30 kilometres of the area, people have been ordered to evacuate, and of course, most of the workers are out. So it's quite horrifying to sit here and read about this and know that. In fact, I really doubt that they will be able to get through this without severe impacts on their health, if not deadly impacts on their health.
Ross, could more have been done to minimise the risks to those around these nuclear plants?
Oh, no doubt. And I'm sure, we'll spend a year, working out what could have been done. I mean, I would put the controversial proposition that if Australians really want to help Japan, we have this problem that we've got nuclear energy dotted all over a highly seismically volatile place. Whereas Australia occupies this vast continent, 70% desert. It's the most stable geological place in the world. If we really wanted to help the Japanese and the rest of the world, we would make Australia a centre for the storage of nuclear waste.
So take some of those spent rods and put them in the desert, you say?
Well, this is one of the reasons why this is exacerbating the risk. If you say, how do we reduce the risk? One of the factors that's exacerbating is the fact that we store, these plants in Japan store the spent rods effectively in the attic. And they're sort of left there cooling for a long time. Now, the reality is we should have as little radioactive material in centres of high geological activity as possible.
Cate, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Not really. I think one of the best ways for us to help Japan would be to not sell them the uranium in the first place. Of course, the uranium that maybe is the case here is from BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto from the Roxby Downs and the Ranger mines in South Australia. So,
but if we didn't sell it to them, someone else would, wouldn't they?
Well, no, we do have a lot of the world's uranium supplies here. I mean, I think that what this has made a lot of countries now do is reconsider nuclear power. And it's interesting, Ziggy Switowski has said that Japan, in fact, has fantastic nuclear reactors, some of the world's best. So if this is what happens to the world's best nuclear reactors, I think we really need to reconsider this industry. It's quite clear it can't withstand natural disasters. It's a bit of a turning point, I think, perhaps for the industry selling itself.
So what are Japan's energy alternatives?
I think we would need to look at solar thermal, other renewable energy technologies.
But you're talking about like a huge population in a small place. So
they could just sit in the dark without heat.
No, of course they wouldn't sit in the dark without heat.
Well, they would if they were reliant on renewable sources of energy today.
No, I think there needs to be another reassessment or a full reassessment of this industry.
Okay, well, Cate, with great respect, I mean, this is one of my problems with the Greens, is that you want to deal with the world as you wish it was rather than the world as it is. And the world as it is requires sources of energy, and there is no way you're going to power, give 50 million, Japanese huddled together on a little rock. The energy they require to live.
Ross, I think sources of energy, though, that are so risky in relation to this radiation that will potentially kill these workers, that will potentially lead other Japanese to have instances of cancer, that still isn't under control. Surely that
but you will say
is
to us,
not good enough.
We can't use oil out of the ground. We can't use coal and keep you happy. You will have a wind farm on every corner or a solar battery strapped to every human being's back. And I'm telling you, those technologies are not sufficiently evolved to do the job. So we have to deal with the situation as we find it. Now, I'm not defending every decision on nuclear energy that's been made in Japan. I am saying that if Australia is both, we've got 40% of the world's uranium in one hole in the ground at Roxby Downs. We sell uranium to the rest of the world. We've got the world's most stable geology. We ought to be. The responsible thing to do is not, to pretend that the world can exist without uranium, but to say we will help manage its risks.
OK, moving on to other issues now. And the Gillard government is facing accusations it's lost control of the country's immigration detention centres. It's been confirmed federal police used beanbag bullets as well as tear gas to subdue detainees at Christmas Island on Sunday night. Immigration Minister Chris Bowen has defended the decisions by officers, saying it was necessary in a very volatile situation. The bullets are 12-gauge shotgun rounds with the lead wrapped in a bag of fabric, so it doesn't cause fatal injuries, but it can